SpaceX Starship. A totally reusable, super heavy lift launch vehicle called Starship is being created by American aerospace corporation SpaceX. The launch vehicle is the highest and most powerful ever constructed. Both Starship rocket stages employ liquid oxygen and liquid methane as fuel, are propelled by Raptor engines, and are built for quick reuse following a vertical landing. The Super Heavy booster stage and the Starship's second stage or spaceship together make up the two-stage to-orbital launch vehicle known as Starship. The spacecraft will be available in 4 major configurations: lunar lander, crew, propellant tanker, and cargo. The spacecraft may be refueled by Starship tankers in low Earth orbit so that it can be transported to higher orbits or other locations. SpaceX anticipates that Starship will be able to transfer 100 t, 220,000 pounds, into this orbit. After that, the spacecraft may either be abandoned in space or it can penetrate the planet's atmosphere and land retropropellantly using its engines. The vehicle's design and construction methods were improved throughout the following 12 years, specifying methane fuel in 2012 and stainless steel construction in 2019. The development process for Starship used an incremental and iterative approach, which called for regular prototype fabrication, testing, and improvement. Important milestones have been reached by the program as of July 2022, including using the Raptor engine in vehicles, Starhopper, and showing the usage of stabilizing flaps, Starship SN8-SN15. The iterative and progressive development of the Starship is characterized by testing on model rockets. The first of these prototypes, known as Starhopper, made a number of low-altitude flights and static firing. Then, between August 2020 and May 2021, 7 of Starship's upper stage prototypes underwent flight testing. The latest of which successfully landed a full-size Starship SN15 after taking off to a height of 10 kilometers, 6.2 miles. Currently, late 2022 is anticipated for the rocket's full-scale orbital test flight. Starship prototype tests may generally be divided into 3 categories. In proof pressure tests, liquids or gases are pressed into the vehicle's tanks to evaluate its capacity. The vehicle may occasionally intentionally be overpressurized, causing a rupture. Then, with or without propellant, the vehicle conducts mission rehearsals to inspect the vehicle and the surrounding infrastructure. Before a test flight, SpaceX fills the vehicle prototype with fuel and briefly burns its engines, a process known as a static fire test, alternatively, a spin prime test, which checks the turbopump spinning without lighting the engines, can be performed. Flight tests and launches may start after these tests are considered successful. Starship prototypes fly to a great height during a suborbital launch, then they descend and land back at a location close to the launch site, at sea, or on offshore platforms. Starship follows the protocols outlined in its mission profile during an orbital launch. Because the firm is accessible to the space journalism community, Starship rocket testing, flights, and launches have gotten a lot of media attention. Low-altitude flights. Starhopper was the name of the first Raptor engine-powered prototype. The vehicle was shorter than the final spacecraft design and featured 3 non-retractable legs. Early in April 2019, the craft made 2 tethered flights, and 3 months later, it hopped untethered to a height of around 25 meters, 80 feet. The vehicle jumped to a height of 150 meters, 500 feet, in August 2019 and then moved to a neighboring landing platform. The vehicle was retired and reconfigured as of August 2021. It is currently used as a mounting point for communication, weather monitoring, and tracking devices, as well as turning into a water delivery tank. Musk provided further information regarding the lower stage booster, the upper stage's technique of regulating its descent, its heat shield, its capability for orbital refueling, and potential destinations other than Mars in late September 2019. Due to stainless steel's cheaper cost, greater melting point, strength at cryogenic temperatures, and simplicity of manufacture, the spacecraft's body material was changed from carbon composites to stainless steel, and the number of aft flaps was decreased from 3 to 2. Before the presentation, SpaceX was already building the first full-size Starship Mk1 and Mk2 upper stage prototypes. They were situated at the respective SpaceX buildings in Boca Chica, Texas, and Cocoa, Florida. Both prototypes were never flown since Mk1 was damaged in a pressure stress test in November 2019 and Mk2's Florida facility was abandoned. After the Mk prototypes, SpaceX started using the prefix SN, which stands for serial number, to identify their future Starship upper stage prototypes. Additionally, none of the prototypes from SN1 through SN4 were ever flown since SN1 and SN3 collapsed during pressure stress testing, while SN4 detonated after starting its fifth engine. SpaceX began building a launch pad for orbit-capable Starship rockets in June 2020. The lack of flaps and a nose cone during construction gave the Starship SN5 a cylindrical form. One Raptor engine, propellant tanks, and a mass simulator made up the test vehicle. On August 5, 2020, SN5 completed a flight at a height of 150 meters, 500 feet, landing safely on a nearby pad. The similar-appearing Starship SN6 repeated the hop successfully on September 3, 2020. SpaceX stress-tested SN7.1 fuel a week later. SN8 was the first upper-stage Starship prototype that was entirely finished. Between October and November 2020, it performed 4 static fire tests before taking to the skies. On December 9, 2020, SN8 flew, gradually shutting down each of its 3 engines, ascending to a height of 12.5 kilometers, 7.8 miles. After doing a belly flop, the object dived back into the atmosphere. The prototype lost thrust and impacted the landing pad during its attempt to land due to a fuel tank pressure problem. The Federal Aviation Administration conducted a 2-month inquiry into the event because SpaceX had broken the terms of its launch license and disregarded warnings of escalating shock wave damage. Similar to SN8, Starship SN9 crashed upon landing on February 2, 2021, after taking off to an altitude of 10 kilometers, 6.2 miles. However, unlike the previous test flight, the explosion was within the Federal Aviation Administration's safety guidelines. After an initial launch that was cancelled 3 hours earlier, Starship SN10 launched on the same trajectory as its 2 predecessors 1 month later, on March 3, 2021. A fire was then observed at the vehicle's base after the vehicle made a violent landing, smashed its landing legs, and leaned to one side. It detonated less than 10 minutes later, most likely as a result of a ruptured propellant tank. The identical flight path was used a few weeks later on March 30, 2021, when Starship SN11 encountered dense fog. Fire starts about 25 seconds after takeoff. Nevertheless, it has little effect on the climb. The rocket burst as it descended, sending pieces of debris up to 8 kilometers, 5 kilometers, distant. The vehicle's avionics were thought to have been harmed by a methane leak, which may have led to an excess of propellant in a Raptor's methane turbopump and ultimately to the explosion. 2 suborbital launch pads, 2 orbital launch pads, 2 landing pads, 2 test stands, and a sizable propellant tank farm were included in the company's March 2021 public building plan. Concerns about the business's jurisdiction, influence, and possible misuse for eviction were raised when it proposed turning the nearby Boca Chica community into a corporate town called Starbase. The fuel storage tanks for the orbital launch pad started to assemble in early April 2021. The crewed lunar lander was chosen by NASA as Starship HLS a few weeks later, on April 16, 2021. In August 2021, Blue Origin, a rival bidder to SpaceX, challenged the judgment and filed a lawsuit. The federal court rejected the case 3 months later. Starship SN15 was chosen to fly in place of the SN12, SN13, and SN14 prototypes, which were abandoned before they were finished. The prototype has general improvements in its avionics, construction, and engines, learning from the shortcomings of earlier prototypes. SN15 launched on May 5, 2021, performed the same maneuvers as other prototypes, and then soft-landed after 6 minutes. Similar to SN10, SN15 experienced a small fire in the engine compartment after landing, but it was quickly put out, thus completing the first successful high-altitude test. Further prototypes such as Starship SN16 were built, but plans for flying them were abandoned. Booster 7 will be used with SN24 for planned orbital test flight. It was first spotted in November 2021, and made cryogenic-proof tests on 2, 6, and June 7, 2022. Starship 24 then conducted spin-prime tests on 18, 20, and July 21, 2022, with an additional one on August 8, 2022. On August 9, 2022, it was static-fired with 2 engines. On September 8, 2022, SN24 performed a static fire test, which lasted 8 seconds and involved all 6 of its engines, 3 atmospheric and 3 vacuum engines. Around 30 of its 25,000 ceramic tiles, which together serve as a heat barrier, were damaged or missing as a result of the test. 2 Starship launch facilities, Kennedy Space Center in Florida and Starbase in Texas, as well as 2 offshore platforms are currently being built as of July 2022. They will serve as the launch pad for several upcoming space missions that have been made possible by the rocket's lower launch expense and more frequent launches. In the near future, Starship will send out satellites and spacecraft, support commercial astronauts, and use the Artemis program to explore the Moon. Long-term, the rocket may support SpaceX's goal of populating Mars and offer quick access to Earth's spaceports. Since 2005, SpaceX has had an idea for a large-capacity launch vehicle.